Greetings everyone. In the upcoming month, people from around the world will come together once again to envision our future. The International Astronautical Congress, an event about space technology, and Hubtropolis, an event about future cities. All of these events will be coming together in the United Arab Emirates. Now, this is a Furry Fandom media channel. So why am I talking about these events to y'all? Are they relevant? What if I told you a furry-led gene research company is going there? And as we are about to hear from their leader, he tells us that they are going there to present a proposal about their solution to securing humanity's future.
So thanks first of all for taking time to do this interview with us. I know you're very busy as well. So first of all, can you brief us on what does Vulpine Designs do and what is it about?
Okay, so in a nutshell, I started Vulpine Designs several years ago to work out how to develop a gene editing system that would be capable of enabling real-life transformation, but in the same system, the same process, also enabling solving genetic defects and diseases that have obviously affected many people, regardless of whether they're furry or not, for a very long time. And I believe that by making sure the technology has these multiple uses, we will gain much social kudos and avoid some drama that way. Because one of the things that keeps getting pointed out to me by people who haven't yet heard about what we do and why we do it is the silly little comic. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's this comic image of a raptor and somebody, some sort of villain is being accused by Spider-Man of being narrow sort of sighted about it, and is saying, you've used this technology to develop turn people into dinosaurs when you could have cured cancer. And the villain says, I didn't want to cure cancer, I wanted to turn people into dinosaurs. And it's like, my response is, as long as the people who are being turned into dinosaurs want it, why not both? Freedom of form is about people being able to represent their true inner selves in their biological form, in their physical form, however they want to do that, as long as it is not negatively affecting other people. And I mean, you would set the bar quite high on that as well. You don't want to say, oh, I feel offended and therefore it's negatively affecting me. There's got to be something a bit more substantial, because otherwise, basically, there would be a religious argument or something brought up by some extreme group or other that doesn't necessarily make any sense. But they would say, but you said that we can't allow you to transform if it affects us in a negative way. So we've got to sort of temper our attempts to please everybody with a realism that says, we still want to actually be able to do this without being stopped for every silly, reasonless reason. So that's kind of the philosophical arguments on one side. You've got the medical arguments on the other. You want to be able to rewrite your genome. You want to be able to edit your DNA. And I mean, yes, in the past, there's been a lot of efforts to develop gene therapies that have not quite done everything they were supposed to do. And in one or two cases have actually caused unfortunate, untimely deaths. And this was because at the time, people didn't understand the human genome fully, or indeed any genome fully, of any significant size. So there was a lack of understanding, and that was obviously a major issue in the 90s, and it set back gene therapy development and gene editing by a decade. Fortunately, there's been a bit of a revival now thanks to the development of CRISPR-Cas9 and zinc finger nucleases and related technologies. So, you know, there's a lot of thanks to go to the likes of Jennifer Doudna and all the others who worked on these systems, because they're at least getting people interested in gene editing again, even if they're not necessarily perfect for everything we want to do. It's sort of a breakthrough into a much more functional approach. So Vulpine Designs is trying to kind of ride that wave of new interest in gene editing, and we're trying to say that there shouldn't be any concern now about the possibility of developing a much better gene editing system than anything currently on the market. Something that combines bioinformatics data from all sorts of different places and puts together a whole model of the body from, as I like to say, from the genes to the genes. So it's like from your DNA to what you're wearing sort of scale and everything in between. It's like if you look at Google Earth and you zoom in on Google Earth, you notice how the pictures get better and more sharp to a particular location. Because obviously when you're zoomed out on Google Earth, there's no point in loading, you know, somebody's backyard perfectly down to the last few inches, because you're not going to be able to see that even within 1 pixel of your monitor when you're zoomed out and looking at the whole Earth. And the same goes when we're looking at the human body. There's only so much resolution you want to load at a time. And I think that by splitting it up into these kind of zoom levels and having the computer process it a bit at a time in that sense, it is possible to still have it do the mathematics in the background without going through all the graphical effort unnecessarily. And that way we can reduce the computing power that's needed, and we can make it so that something that, if somebody thinks about it in very literal terms of a simulation of the entire body, you know, especially if they're thinking about it like a game developer, they might say, oh, this is going to take you decades. You know, especially if they're talking in terms of like games like Crisis or something. But does it run Crisis? But does it run the Guess, which is our gene editing system we're developing at Vulpine Designs?
So it looks.
Sorry, I was just going to finish.
It's okay.
I was going to say the Guess is intended to have these 25 different modules. Which split up further into 427 submodules, each of which is a bit of a project in and of itself. So it's like a whole operating system, essentially, of lots of programs all interacting with each other, and each of them deals with a different aspect of the body. And these 25 modules are like different layers of the zooming in and out of the body, and different approaches and aspects that need to be handled. And when you put them all together, which I've been spending the last sort of 10 years diagramming how that will work, then you have something that is much greater than the sum of its parts. And you can connect it to both the internet for sharing gene edits that you've developed with other people using a system we call Laboration, which I can go into further at some point. And you can also connect it to a molecular bioprinter that we're going to call the geneticizer. And that will be something that enables you to produce the gene editing vectors in real life that you've just designed on your computer. And it'll be much like the RepRap is for 3D printing in terms of trying to democratize this and make it open source and available to everybody.
So it sounds like Vulpine Designs is sort of trying to make big contributions to the renaissance of the gene editing thing. Yeah. It sounds very promising, like the kind of things you said, or the operating systems, or the kind of abilities, capabilities of gene editing. It looks very futuristic. It looks something like out of a movie. But with all of that, there have been a lot of concerns raised in the field of gene editing by a lot of scientists on the grounds of morality, or should I say ethics, the kind of social ethics that it may conflict with, the implications, and also ecological impacts. What do you have to say to that?
Well, when it comes to ethics, I believe that the ability to change yourself to be your true form, as it were, as you feel you are inside, on the outside, is clearly an ethical plus for these kinds of tech. Now, excuse me, much like beauty is in the eye of the beholder, ethics is something that is subjective to some degree, and it depends on who is using the technology and how they're using it and why. And to that end, you know, if we were, say, doing this for the money, we would, instead of doing what we're doing with open source, we would simply make it a proprietary system. We would say nobody else can look at this code, it's all ours, and we're going to sell it to the highest bidder, and then we would sell it, and then along comes some, you know, big pharmaceutical corporation or some government or military, and they buy it out, and you either never hear from it again because they want to suppress it, you know, in order to keep the status quo, or you find that it gets turned into something very different to what you wanted it to be and doesn't necessarily adhere to freedom of form anymore, and instead maybe is being used, for example, to produce super soldiers, and for the benefit of one specific country at that. That, I believe, is a much bigger ethical danger when it comes to the potential misuses of these technologies. And I believe that I'm mitigating that by making this open source. Vulpine Designs will make its money from supporting and training, and from curating databases and providing co-development contracts to larger clients who want to make their own sort of extensions to the system, which those extensions will still be open source, but this will obviously be something that is then much more useful to their particular needs. So by doing that, we can ensure that we have an income stream that is independent of the existence of the projects themselves, so that if we disappear for any reason, if our company vanishes, the projects still exist, that still be there and available on, like, you know, people's Git repositories that they may have been editing it from on their computers, etc., and they would be able to make a fork or something of it if need be. And I believe that it's important that a system like this is kept available. I believe that if you say that, oh no, this is playing God or something, you're missing the point, because if there is a higher being, a higher entity that has created everything that we see and are involved in, that entity would have intervened much longer ago to prevent us from getting to the technological state we're already in now, if they wanted to prevent us from doing things like this. I mean, if you take a look at cows, if you take a look at dogs, cats, you know, any domesticated animal, they only exist because of us. They only exist because of the effort to breed them selectively over many millennia. And, you know, agriculture started 70,000 years ago or more. It's not something new to manipulate our environment or to change the way evolution works, because by planting crops, by, you know, keeping animals with us and expecting them to conform to certain requirements of our society, we're already doing a lot to evolution by that. And so to say suddenly that deliberately selectively editing DNA is wrong, I mean, what about where all that time that we've spent, you know, with selectively breeding, where there have been all these animals that weren't quite right, that fell by the wayside as a result of not quite being the desirable trait? You know, were we denying them the right to breed or something because they were not exactly what we wanted? So I think that it's a bit of a peculiar thing to sort of single out gene editing by modern techniques as this, you know, boogeyman. I think it's just that it's because it's the zeitgeist of the moment and everybody's talking about it. So of course somebody has got to have a dissenting voice, and somebody has got to play devil's advocate. So along come those who have nothing better to do but debate, and they debate, and, you know, they troll and do whatever they're going to do. But meanwhile, haters going to hate. We're going to keep on rolling. We've got things to do that actually matter and are going to change the world. Are they going to change the world by talking like they're doing?
So it looks like you've got yourself prepared for, how should I say, you've considered through the kind of questions that have been raised as a result of gene editing, which is something that you are pushing towards as well. Let's bring our attention back to Vulpine Designs, the staff. I've read through your Vulpine Designs team page and your Freedom of Form organization's team page as well. I see furry avatars. Are furries in your team?
Yeah, it's mostly furries, to be honest, because that's where we began from. I mean, I myself really kind of had the idea for Vulpine Designs as a result of the furry fandom and of being part of it. And I found that my personal identity has grown closer to my sort of vulpine form as time has gone on, so it's only become all the more relevant that I should want to do this. So you come back and interview me in however many years it takes us to finish developing this system, and you'll find you're looking at a kitsune. A seven-tailed fox will be talking to you over whatever we use instead of Zoom by then, or maybe we still use Zoom, I don't know.
The cameras may be showing humans, as furries called, but I see a kitsune right there.
Thank you.
So from now, furries are on your team, and it seems like you've got Vulpine Design started from the furry starting line. In what way are furries related to the Freedom of Form initiative that you're having? Are they related?
They are. You see, we are talking about groups of people who have quite a deep connection to these interesting avatars, these forms, these personas. And I think through the way that I've asked people and the groups that I've been asking in, there has been some self-selection for otherkin and therianthropes and similar more sort of spiritually aligned types who have a more visceral, ingrained need to express their inner self. And so you find that the sort of more kind of casual furries who just put on a fursuit every so many months and go to a convention because it's fun, or who draw art just for the money and that's enough for them, they're not going to be so interested in working with us. Or if they are, it's because we've got some vaguely interesting notion for them that they just go, all right, what the heck, but really the majority of those who are working with us are much more feeling a need to see this happen, like I myself am, to be honest. And it's coming from somewhere deeper within than simply drawing some art or wearing a fursuit. Although I can assure you that for many of these people, drawing those pictures and wearing those fursuits does help. It's just that it's not necessarily enough for them. That's why we're looking at this as a way to do for us what actual transgender surgery does for people who are transgender, rather than just dressing up in drag.
You said about this need to fulfill this self-expression through gene editing and as displayed in Vulpine Designs, furry art turning into your personas. Like, what is this need?
It's have you heard of gender dysphoria, which transgender people suffer from before they go through their transition, and usually during it as well. Well, there is such a thing as species dysphoria too. It is very similar to gender dysphoria, but as the name suggests, it's about your species. It's about your shape and form of your body not matching with your, well, for want of a better word, your soul, your inner self, your notion of what you're supposed to be. And And this can become quite distressing if it isn't handled in some way. And for some people, it's perhaps, you know, enough for the time being to do fursuiting and to do other furry activities that help to kind of temper the pain of being in the wrong body. But in the long term, what they need, and what they tell me time and again they need, is some kind of real transformation to actually be a thing. It's one of the reasons there's so many transformation stories online. You know, it's not just for some kind of fetish, although for quite a lot of people it is, but it's not just that. You know, there's also quite a lot of people who it really is an expression of this yearning that is built up inside them. But of course, we mustn't sort of pigeonhole Vulpine Designs into just being there to help these people. It is, but it's more than that. You know, because there are people who are suffering from genetic diseases day in, day out, who are in pain constantly, or who are, you know, unable to be much help to society at any rate, you know, registered disabled for this and that reason. And if it is possible to genetically modify oneself to, say, grow a tail and ears that are pointy and up high on your head, and fur all over your body, and a muzzle, and so on and so forth. If it's possible to do that, which I believe it is, then it's sure as hell possible to edit out some genetic disease, for example, eczema, Crohn's disease, or you know, Hashimoto's thyroiditis or something. You can make a lot of these things that are currently holding people back, costing the economy countless billions every year. You can make them gradually go away if you've got the technology to have this one-time edit that, if you apply it to every cell in the person's body, or as many as you can possibly get to, which, you know, the more the better, then you can make sure that you're not causing like either an immune rejection between the old cells and the new edited ones, or for the edited ones to just kind of be overridden by the old ones replicating and multiplying them out of the way, which can happen over time with some current gene therapy technologies, where they may last for, say, 7 years at most, and then essentially all of the new edited cells have been replaced out. So we do need to make sure that whatever processes we develop with the guest system are suitable for ensuring that there's like a what's the word? A sequence of events that goes in the right order to make sure that first the body is given the instruction to unpack the gene editing vector, but it is given the instruction to unpack the right part of it, so that it knows each step of the transformation in turn, and it only does them when it's safe to do them. And that way what you get is something that can provide a route to doing every single cell type, because in each cell type it can respond differently and say, okay, we're in this particular cell type. In this cell type, we do not want to use this particular bit of instruction, or it will cause a problem. But what we can also do is we can edit the same genes into every cell and just activate them differently, use epigenetics. So there are ways and means, basically, is what it boils down to. There are ways and means that you can get around the difficulties that biology presents, and you can say to the body, we need you to pretend you're an embryo for this amount of time in this particular way, but not in that particular way that would cause cancer. You know, and we can give it very precise instructions in that sense if we create the right kind of gene editing vector with the right kind of sequential instructions. I believe it's going to be difficult, very difficult, but certainly not impossible. And it's just a matter of time till we work out how to crack these big data problems that come into play. So that's why I've developed the guest design, which, I mean, there's a ridiculously huge diagram that if you put it up on a 4K screen, you can't really read it properly till you zoom in. But you know, it deals with every aspect basically as best we can. But there's always going to be more details to put into it yet. So that's why it's going to take us at least 5 years to develop the first version of the gas, even if we have $40 million tomorrow. Which we'd like, by the way. If anybody's got $40 million kicking around, please call me.
So the need that you're mentioning doesn't apply to only species dysphoria, but I guess, according to what I hear from you, it's something about a greater need to alleviate some genetic problems that are happening among us right now.
Yeah.
But you talked about species dysphoria, which is quite interesting, and you've in a way compared that with furries wearing fursuits. Like for furries with gender dysphoria though, like for gene editing, like how can that help them in a way? Like species dysphoria, do furries necessarily have them?
Not all furries. And I'm not expecting every furry to want to use this technology. Some of them will be happy to just keep using fursuits or going to conventions, you know, drawing art, whatever it is they want to do. You know, within the furry fandom, there will only be some of them actually want to transform into their fursunas, and that's fine. I'm not trying to force this down anybody's throat. You know, the whole point of freedom of form is it's your choice. You know, you get to decide if you want to apply it or not. But I believe that there are vast numbers more people who have some kind of genetic problem or another, or some susceptibility to cancer or whatever in their family, and they get, you know, their genome sequenced at some point to find out, hey, I need to edit this bit out, and that way I'll live longer. You know, it could be as simple as that, even if they've not got outwardly anything wrong with them. So there are plenty of applications for this kind of thing, and I believe that it's the sort of thing that really, if we are to be a responsible society, once this system is developed, it should be in every doctor's office, it should be in every biohacking space, it should be, you know, in every community center and every school, and you know, just anywhere for people to learn about it, use it, and better themselves as a result. Write yourself to write the future. So
it's like a way to, like, instead of saying, well, I'm gonna improve myself, but where? You do it directly on yourself in a way. Like you're trying to say the application can reach onto there, can be also applied for health, and especially to in a way for some people to alleviate the kind of worries or concerns of dysphoria upon their species. Like for some furries, especially other kids themselves too. So all of that said, we are seeing this Vulpine Designs coming from a furry starting line, and then coming here with a much bigger ambition than what its originally furry centric kind of a target became. You all are going to a aeronautics convention. What does aeronautics got to do with Vulpine Designs, which is like a gene research organization?
It's not just aeronautics, it's astronautical. So we're talking about going into space. You got to bear in mind that space is not exactly a very nice place for a living thing to be. You're surrounded by a vacuum, even if you're in a can of air, you know, which a spaceship essentially is once it's floating around up there. And your can has very thin walls. So, you know, it could get hit by a random passing asteroid or a piece of some space junk or other. It could be hit by radiation constantly, which it probably will be up there. And some of that radiation will pass right through it and right through you. And some of it will hit the molecules in you. It will hit your DNA and cause random little mutations. So that's a real worry. Then there's the fact that you're weightless in space. You know, there's no big lump of rock to pull you down. So you're floating around. Your body isn't using its muscles much. You know, you can try and exercise for several hours a day when you're up in space, and the astronauts do on the International Space Station. But when you get back down to any planet, especially Earth, but any planet really, you will find that you have less muscle than you had when you went up. And you will find that you have other peculiar issues starting to arise in your body because your genome is designed for a world with a constant-ish gravity, you know, within certain parameters. And if it is outside those parameters by far enough, then things are going to start going out of whack, which is what happens for astronauts if they're up in space for more than a few months at a time, really, and even to some degree within the first week or two. You know, there are certain things they can do to try to mitigate it, but at the end of the day, the human body isn't really meant for space. It's just, yes, it's sort of technically capable of being up there for a while in a space suit or a space craft, but you know, it's not really what it was evolved for. And we need to consider that it's going to take a long time before we can have Star Trek style spaceships where you've got proper artificial gravity that, you know, is kind of floor plate wide across the whole ship, or where you've got warp speed and can go anywhere in the galaxy within a matter of, you know, months or years perhaps. But you know, if we're talking about needing to take 4 years, you know, even if you manage to accelerate at up to light speed, it still take you 4 years just to get to the nearest star that isn't the sun. And there's no guarantee that there's a habitable planet orbiting that. You know, what's it going to take to get us out of this solar system? It's going to take a lot of ingenuity, and it's going to take thinking in terms of generation ships, things like that. So you need people who can cope with space long term. You need people who can cope with unusual planets long term, rather than looking for what we currently deem to be habitable, so that we can make intelligent life multiplanetary without it taking forever to do so. Because the longer we wait and the longer we take to get to somewhere that is just right in the Goldilocks zone, you know, then we're putting ourselves under more risk, because we've got all our eggs in one basket right now. Everybody is basically on Earth or just orbiting it. And it's a real worry because anything could happen to the Earth. You know, it takes the wrong asteroid on the wrong day, or, you know, a big super volcanic explosion or two, and we're thrown way out. You know, we probably don't lose every single person, but it'd be enough to certainly put a real dent in the concept of civilization. And I mean, we don't want that to happen. So we need to have other places we can be at the same time, and where we can back up the original from, so to speak. So Elon Musk was very right about that, you know, when he said we need to make life multiplanetary. And I mean, I can see that he's developing a great rocket system for getting us to Mars. Mars is an excellent first step. I don't count the moon as a good step, really, because it's too close to the Earth. And if you're really talking about taking it seriously, the concept of being a multiplanetary species, the moon isn't good enough. Mars is a better choice. You know, the further the better, essentially. But the thinking here is Mars gives you enough resources, more resources than the moon does, to start building some form of colony. You probably can't have a very large number of people there, but you can have maybe a city's worth. And that's enough, you know, to say, yes, we've got another colony there. So if we can do that, that's great. But there's this hole that I keep seeing in the plans of not just Elon Musk, but other organizations like Nexus Aurora and you know, Blue Origin and Boeing and Lockheed and all the rest. They are thinking in terms of terraforming Mars. They're thinking in, you know, I mean, for crying out loud, Elon Musk goes around wearing a T-shirt sometimes that says "Nuke Mars," because he wants to heat up the atmosphere of Mars. He wants to basically vaporize enough water and enough of the carbon dioxide ice on Mars around the poles, you know, to start creating a thicker atmosphere. And, you know, he wants to make it a little bit more livable that way. I mean, sure, you can throw nukes at Mars as much as you like. You can irradiate it as much as you like. It'll get hotter. That ain't going to help people to live there. And, you know, it's not going to give you a lasting solution. Eventually, it'll cool down again. Eventually, the atmosphere that you've created will boil off, because Mars doesn't have much magnetic field at all. So instead of trying to change a planet and going through this gargantuan effort to terraform it, which sure, we've managed to cause climate change here on Earth through a few hundred years of burning fossil fuels, but you're not going to have those kinds of resources so easily to hand on Mars, even if you took large equipment there. So I think it's more realistic to change ourselves and make ourselves more suitable to the cold, to thinner atmospheres, or even no atmosphere in the case of space. Excuse me. And to make ourselves more suitable to radiation, to coping with it. You take a look at cockroaches, take a look at particularly tardigrades, also known as water bears. They can cope with being exposed to the hard vacuum and radiation of space. These tardigrades can. And they end up desiccated, but you rehydrate them, they come back to life. So clearly there's something in their DNA that makes it difficult for radiation to do much to them. Now, granted, they are tiny, so that's probably got something to do with it, because, you know, less surface area to be hit by radiation in the first place. Perhaps they needed to be left up there for longer. I don't know. I'm sure there are scientists who have already thought of that. But the way I see it, there's much to learn from different species that already exist here on Earth. And since we're looking at sort of accessing the library of DNA that already exists in other species in order to create furry transformation in real life, we're going to be in a very good position to understand what is going to work and what isn't when it comes to developing adaptations for new planets, or for indeed coping with climate change on this one, so that people can deal with the heat. For example, you know, when it gets to like 56 degrees Celsius in Baghdad, which was something that was mentioned in a recent article, or, you know, when it gets really ridiculously cold in Antarctica or something, you know, and you don't want to freeze to death, you need to be able to cope with that too. Fur is very useful for something like that, of course. And I mean, we need to sort of have this conversation with those who are a bit more stuck in their ways, perhaps, and say to them, what would you rather have happen? Would you rather be right and dead, or would you rather accept that perhaps we can change ourselves, we can rewrite our DNA, and it's not then going to be the end of the world? Because it would be the end of the world if we didn't, potentially. I'm not saying it absolutely will be the end of the world. There's always a small chance that from here on in, no asteroids ever hit the Earth, no volcanoes ever erupt, and the sun stays where it's supposed to be and doesn't go supernova, and everybody lives happily ever after, and joy be, you know, praise to the Lord, etc. But realistically speaking, going on the track record that this planet has shown us in its strata of rocks, shown us in, you know, various events that have happened within our lifetimes even, I think that the trend is the other way. I think it's towards things that we really need to prepare for. So if we can be better adapted, and if we can diversify our genetics, then I believe we're going to have a better chance of some form of intelligent life, even if you don't want to call it human anymore, surviving. So this is why we want to go to the Astronautical Congress. We want to say to these space companies, you need us. You really need us, you know, to help with this.
So it's like to prepare humanity for the future lah. Like now we are imperfect, we are very vulnerable, as you see, and that's something that you hope to, through Vulpine Designs, not only help humans like express themselves, but maybe to also fulfill a greater need to survive as a civilization.
Exactly.
Well, it's so much. I've learned so much from you today, Atha. Thank you
Welcome.
so much for speaking. Thank you so much for speaking with me.
No problem.
Thank you.
And thank you, Pawsey. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.